Hello, my name is Alfonso Alexander, and I am the president of the NASBA Center for the Public Trust. Let me first say welcome to all of you who have chosen to join us today. I think you are in store for a real treat. We're really excited to bring to you Linda Galindo as our keynote for today. We have two other sessions this week, one tomorrow and again one on Thursday. But you guys are in for a magnificent presentation from a tremendous friend of mine, Linda Galindo. Let me tell you a little bit about Linda. Linda is a fierce advocate for personal accountability. Linda has consulted companies, large and small, institutions, universities, and even students on the concept of personal accountability, all designed to help you be a better ethical leader tomorrow than you are today. Linda originally started her career in communications. She was an on-air personality for a very long time, still does some of that as well, and delivers messages in a very compelling way, as you'll see here in just a moment. But for the last several years, Linda has been leading a consulting firm where she's developed many programs, a lot of training, collateral, and other things around accountability. And she's helping change the world and leaders so that they can be more accountable. So without further ado, would you guys please join me in welcoming Linda Galindo, and let's have some fun with Linda.
Yay, let's do the pretend clap thing. Yay, here I am. I'm gonna share my screen. Share. Oh, so love it when that works. So good morning, everybody. For me, I'm in Half Moon Bay, California, and I am a fierce advocate for personal accountability, and I want to talk to you about something that is so important right now. And I'm working in 5 companies with leadership teams, and this will be a very relevant talk because the whole idea of ethics and accountability is actually a feast or famine proposition in the organizations I'm working in. So the question I put forward on the description of this was feast or famine. And at the end of the day, you know, is it, let me go back to it, is ethics just a BS topic? When I get into organizations and there's some hard questions that have to be answered, and I think they're ethical questions, I just see workforce shake their head and think, this is BS. Well, what does accountability have to do with ethics? So making that connection. And I want to challenge you to get personal in this brief time I have with you about your truth when it comes to being ethical and accountable. And I'm going to provide insightful, practical, immediately useful strategies to live ethically and accountably, and ask that you influence leaders who seem to have lost their way by your example. I'm realizing as my 2 daughters graduated from college, at their commencement speeches, the speakers did the same thing. They challenged the audience, the graduating students, it's your turn now to go forward and make the world work. And I'm like, BS. You need to hold people accountable for the mess that's been made. And you're being given an opportunity, and we need to be accountable as the current leaders going forward. But lest you think that I'm kind of classless and using BS, I want to let you know that what I mean by BS is baloney soup. So I want to clarify that BS in my world of providing education on accountability and talking about ethics really is baloney soup. It's not a swear word. I don't know about you, but I would want to stay as far away as possible from something as unappetizing as bologna soup. Just imagining it as, ugh. My husband loves bologna sandwiches, but I highly doubt he'd go for bologna soup if it became a thing. So is a topic of ethics just business school bologna soup? There are times in our careers when bologna soup is going to be on the menu along with accountability and ethics. And right now you might think, ew, I would never partake of bologna soup. Nobody definitely would want that. It's not for me. And that is an easy thing to reject. It's like, yeah, I know I don't want that for sure. But here's a question. What if you were starving and bologna soup was all there was? Would that change your mind about whether or not, if it was the only nutrition available and it would keep you alive, how about then? Would bologna soup be okay with you? So obviously, this is a metaphor for situations you might find yourself in where what you once thought was unthinkable, like heating up and eating bologna soup, actually becomes your reality, like you're faced with the decision. So let me tell you a couple of real stories about bologna soup. And as I'm talking and as I go through this presentation, I do want you to use the chat to ask questions because I'm going to leave time for that at the end. I'd love to hear what your questions are. But I'm going to tell you a couple of real stories about bologna soup. I get a text marked urgent, and it's from a chief financial officer that I had been coaching. And this particular chief financial officer was on the executive team I had been working with in the midst of, and they're right in the middle of due diligence because they're preparing for their next round of funding in their startup journey. This was this CFO's very first role as a CFO. She had been the CFO for a year, but she was promoted from within. She was part of the succession planning of the company for her to become the CEO, the CFO. And the text message that she sent me, now keep in mind I've been coaching for a year with this executive team, it says, do you have time to talk right now? And in my executive coaching, it's usually the C-suite. And, it's my job to respond as quickly as possible to C-suite. But the way it read is, this is urgent, can you talk right now? And we get on a call and she laid out her dilemma. I've been asked by the CEO to issue a reimbursement check to an executive vice president that does not follow the rule, isn't following the rules of reimbursement. And the documentation from this executive vice president isn't in hand. And when I asked for the documentation to do the reimbursement, the response was, I don't have time. Our due diligence assignments are the priority to get the next round of funding. And I know I have what you need somewhere. I just don't have time to look for it. And I need the reimbursement as soon as possible. Turns out, find out later, his wife is giving him pressure, this executive vice president, to get this reimbursement because she's handling their personal finances at home and he's got a problem. Well, this executive vice president went to the CEO when the CFO said no to the reimbursement without the documentation. The CEO needed this executive vice president to stay on track and get his due diligence reports done. The time was looming for the deadline for the series funding. Stress was very high. A lot was at stake to nail down the funder. Startups are often, as you may or may not know, or will find out in your career if you get into startups, are a do whatever it takes culture. And they often exhibit the opposite of high performance team behavior under the guise of no time, few resources. In her case, there was an additional and potentially confusing dynamic to work through. And the additional dynamic was the demands of due diligence as they secure their next round of funding. So she's got to do her job, make sure everything's right. And she's making representations in the due diligence about how their processes work and policies so that they're staying legal and, how the executive group functions in something like expense reimbursement. So she's got all that going on. And she says, the CEO is telling me to just pay it, but we are representing in our company narrative, she tells me, that we have policies and procedures in place for reimbursement, along with checks and balances to keep us accountable to our expense and account protocols. All the executives know what the rules are. Some fail to keep track as they go, and if they can't find a receipt, it has to come out of their pocket. Why can't I just submit it later in a different month? What difference does it make as long as it's accounted for in the right fiscal year? So that's what the EVP is saying to anybody who will listen. The CFO was astonished at this level of basic sloppiness, and was even it was a possibility, like they were even going to consider it. If each of the 5 executive vice presidents, she's telling me this, operated this way, signaling to their VPs, so this is executive vice president level, right there with the CEO, that it's fine to do this, the job of the CFO would quickly become a nightmare and relegated to babysitting to get the basic accounting done accurately and on time. She put her foot down early on, explaining that this whole dynamic more than once to the EVPs, that there's no exceptions to expense reports turned in correctly and on time. Her staff chasing down what was a clear requirement of an executive vice president's job was unacceptable. Yet here was the CEO telling her to make an exception and take care of this to get this executive vice president to pipe down about his wife's insistence to get reimbursed for a very expensive plane ticket and stay focused. The urgent text to me was the CFO, who I coach, agonizing over pushing back on the CEO. And this was her question. Do I tell him no? What she was being told to do was an exception. It was a slippery slope, and she knew it. The CEO and the CFO both knew this particular executive vice president was high maintenance, and it was tempting to just make the noise go away so they could get the next round of funding nailed down. It's just this once, but the CFO knew better. This executive vice president often made his lack of planning other people's emergencies, but he was exceptionally skilled and brought in massive opportunities for the organization and had a lot to do with whether this funding round happened. But to the CFO, exceptions violated the policy. They were representing 2 potential funders, and it would be on her watch. Her direct question to me, do I tell him no? What are your options, I asked. Just do it and fix it later. She said, I could just do it and fix it later, but that turns my stomach. It's not like an audit wouldn't catch it, but in the scheme of things, it's probably no big deal, and it's definitely not a deal breaker, but I can just do it. Here, we've been talking about accountability and ethics in our executive team building sessions, and I do this now, and I can just see a future filled with this. She wants a culture of accountability. So I've been, working with the executive team. I've been saying this stuff. We want a culture of accountability that brings employees of an organization together, puts the needs of the whole first before their individual agendas, simultaneously shows employees that they're going to experience fair compensation for their role and their expertise that they were hired for, while the organization provides a place for them to be totally personally accountable, operate within ethical guidelines, and will have a commitment to your professional success. I'm saying this, I'm teaching the whole leadership team this over time, and the EVPs are getting executive coaching. Instead, she's thinking if she makes this exception, a future filled with bologna soup is ahead of her. We say one thing, she said, and then we do another. We check the box of accountability and ethics training, and then proceed to make exceptions because why? We're special. We're senior leaders. We're busy and important. The future of the company hangs in the balance if we don't get our reimbursement that we failed to document correctly in a timely manner. No. So why am I making this such a big deal? But then she said, if I just times that by 15 other VPs who get the signal, it's okay, finance will take care of it. She said, who wants to sign on for a steady diet of bologna soup? No one. But if we don't get this funding, we don't eat anything. Is it really going to hang on that? What do I do? I said, okay, so option 1 is say no. Do you have another option? And she said, the other option is to tell the CEO no and have the EVP eat the expense, which is the accountable thing for the EVP to do. He made his choice not to keep track of his receipts. and to ask for his reimbursement past the deadline. That violates the policy. Then make sure that in the next executive level meeting, bring it up again. Here's the expense reimbursement policy, no exceptions. Remind them they don't want the compensation for their highly skilled professionals in the finance department to be spending their time babysitting activities because of their unwillingness to be accountable. And then ask her to make it look right after the fact, which is to her and is unethical. Well, that's an option. I said, maybe leave out the word babysitting when you're telling them this stuff. And so what's your concern with that option? And she said, this is confronting the CEO. This is saying no to the CEO. That terrifies me. I could lose my job. I've only been the CFO for a year. Now, I know this CEO. I've been his executive coach for a year. And my first reaction when she's telling me what he's asking her to do, that she sends me an urgent text, was anger that he put her in this position. My second was he was going to be tested to walk his talk, and that would determine if I continued with him as a client. So I'm in the room, I'm teaching them this: be accountable, stay ethical, challenge each other to stay in that space. The fact that you'd even ask one of your people to do this it's not taking hold, obviously. So I urged her absolutely, positively, unequivocally to push back. This is a no, full stop. Go to the CEO and say, absolutely not. I'm not making the exception. No. We can role play that conversation if you'd like. No, she said, I know what to say. I just needed reassurance from my coach. And I said, great. Follow up with me after you have the conversation. And the next day I get a text. And the text said, had the conversation. And I text back, do you want to talk, or send me an emoji that captures how that went? And she sends me a thinking emoji. She's thinking about does she want to talk to me, or does she want to send me an emoji that captures it? Then she sends me a series of 3 emojis. First, it was really super fearful to go in and have this conversation. And then he was super annoyed. So that was the annoy. And then a thumbs up. So she got through it. And then she summarized it with this text: documentation required is holding strong. Thank you, Linda. So she, she's super, super appreciative. How do you think it feels to take bologna soup off the menu? This is total BS. We're making an investment in a consultant to come in and say, our culture is to be a culture of accountability. We're going to hire people and say, you're walking into a culture of accountability. And then we're going to do this, what seems like a little tiny innocuous thing, but it really isn't. It's so do I get to push back? And the CEO is saying, I want you to risk, and I want you to innovate, and I want us to challenge each other. And when it's just a no, and am I going to be able to do that? So that's the first example. Somebody just taken bologna soup off the menu in the organization at the C-suite level. The other example, actually there's 2 more, but this next one is a CEO I've been working with for over 10 years, and their sales group is going to miss their sales goal to get the bonus by $3,000. $3,000, not $30,000, not $3 million, $3,000. And so the sales executive VP comes to the CEO that I work with, and he says, this is like our 3rd or 4th company that we've worked together. And he says, I really want you to relent and move the goalpost so that everybody gets the bonus. And so does he reconsider when the executive vice president comes and says, if you don't relent and make this work, and we get to move this amount, then our best people are going to leave. The best salespeople are going to leave. They're not going to get what they promised for hitting a goal. It's been an awful year. They worked hard. They recalibrated. They were given the opportunity, actually, to recalibrate. It's like, okay, this is a whole different situation with the pandemic and everything going on. So let's everybody stop. Let's take a hit in productivity and let's recalibrate. What's it going to take? What new resources do you need in a virtual selling environment? Everything they asked for was provided. And they missed it by $3,000. And if you're going to fix it, is that ethical? What would you do? Because they're going to make a representation to their board of directors, and the bonus payout was significant, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's the other example. And then the example I run into all the time when I'm talking to college classes pre-COVID, I go talk in business schools, and I always get this question about, we get assigned to do a group project with people we don't necessarily pick. So we're going to do a group paper, and 2 of the 5 people are not participating. They're not doing, their share of the work. And they want to, just like you'd go at work and say to a manager, these 2 people are not doing their share of the work. And, we need them to kick in. And the manager says, you got to hold them, you got to get them, hold them accountable. I mean, you know what the work product has to be. So, get it going. Manager's not going to do anything about it. So the people just muscle through on the team and roll over the non-participators or the people who aren't pulling their weight because they want the bonus at the end of the day. They're just going to go ahead and do it. But in college, you're writing a paper with a group and 2 people aren't doing it, but they want the grade for their transcript for graduate school. So it's like, we'll just roll over it and do our best. I mean, the 2 people who aren't doing their share are going, I've got it made. These people want it more than I'm willing to do the work, and they just take care of it, and that's that. But the ethical part comes to, we were accountable. We got the project done not as a team, but as a group of people. Is it ethical to put the names of people who didn't pull their weight or do their share on the paper and turn it in? So that I can get the A for graduate school transcript. I mean, is that an ethical move on my part? So that question comes up a lot, good question. You're in a college class, it's a group you didn't pick, you want the A, you put their name on the paper, they didn't do the work. Okay, so that's 3 examples in my hundreds of examples in a 30-year career doing this. Most of the people I'm working with are in their 20s and 30s, like the startup companies, they're late 30s. EVPs, CEOs are maybe in their 40s. I'm in my 60s. So it hasn't changed much, except that the degree of the question seems greater. It seems like my surprise still remains when someone's being asked to do something that isn't ethical or is not accountable, and yet as a value in the organization, it's right there in the value statement, and they have me come in and work with it in the culture. And the individual, most people I'm working with want to work in ethical and accountable cultures, but when leadership isn't behaving, it's like, what am I going to do? What do I do? So I want to give you some pointers on how to stay out of bologna soup, because this is going to just try to get served to you a lot. And it's pretty discouraging. You have to really curious about how you're going to act and what your decisions are going to be as you go through. So my world is in this idea of a mindset that if you take anything away from this presentation, it's that there's something always available to you that I'm going to ask you never, ever, ever to advocate to someone else. That if you choose to go ahead and make the exception, if you choose not to push back, if you choose just to stay quiet and put your head down and do what you're being told to do, but you know in your gut it's unethical or it leaves your accountability out of the equation for you as a professional, that you own that you take ownership of it. So you have a mindset of 100% available of personal accountability to you. And when you don't accept a lot of that, like 50% is up to me and 50% is the world, it starts to just sort of, it's an unconscious and unintentional sense of finger pointing and blaming. It's very predictable if someone says, 50% is up to me and 50% is outside condition, and I signed on the dotted line to take a job or to do an assignment or do a task. This whole 100% is available, and I don't think to myself, well, as long as I get the right people to work with, as long as I have a good boss, as long as my company acts ethically, as long as my company is accountable, the leaders I have are accountable. So there's very little as long as, the closer you get to this 100% where you have ownership and action and risk, and you're creative and you answer for your results. I mean, that's the employee I want, the one closer to the 100%. You can predict, and I have a tool that I created that I administer. It's called the Mindset of Accountability Assessment. So I can see where someone is in their thinking before we start interacting, because I can tell right when they're going to start making excuses or blaming or finger pointing. And so I do that with executive teams to decide whether I'm going to work with them or not. Because if they don't score high enough, I can tell they're just going to start backing off of their personal integrity and their ethics, and they're going to, violate their accountability level and blame outside circumstances ad nauseum. So I can kind of tell whether it's going to be a good initiative that I come in and work with them or don't even bother. And unfortunately, I'm getting a lot of don't even bother. So the model that I teach in organization starts with an individual with the mindset of responsibility, ownership going into something, and then empowerment is part of this equation, because it's only self-empowerment that you can put in place, which requires you to take action and risk. So we have a lot of workforce leaders that say, we want you to come in and be creative and innovate, and tell us better ways to do things. And I had these ginormous companies in the Fortune 100. The top EVPs are like, their legacy systems are so bogged down with political bleh, I can't take action risk. They say it, but then they don't want you to rock the boat. And there's a lot of struggle going on there, because technology has really become a great enabler of moving faster and more efficiently. But if you have legacy systems in place, on top of the fact that you have regulation that you have to follow, but people can see past some of the restrictions if they haven't been in a long time. So new people come in and be creative and risk and innovate, but don't rock the boat and don't change anything. It's crazy making, and a lot of it is bologna soup. So you take ownership going in, you take action and risk, that's self-empowerment, and then you answer for your results each day. That's the model I teach over and over again to executive leadership, to become a real team and to create an environment that this is what is going to be happening. And when you change your lens about accountability and being personally accountable, and you own that we have an ethical environment, then you start asking clarifying questions so that everybody sees clearly what we're choosing. I don't get it into good and bad, right and wrong. So we're saying it's okay to make exceptions. We're saying, go ahead and make it look this way so it's right for the board, and that's okay. And then if we get caught, we'll own it. We'll take ownership of it, or we'll excuse or blame. But just tell the truth. Like, what's the straight truth about this? Hey, welcome to our organization where we fudge and cheat and make exceptions all the time, but it's okay with us. Just say that. I mean, that's being very accountable, frankly. Instead of, no, look over there. That's not what's really happening. It's gray. This is just this one time. How do you want to operate so I know how to operate in it? As I get into cultures, I see whether people are doing excusing or reasons, and this is a very important takeaway for you. Excuses are when you're on that other side of the line of, victim. You're a victim. A reason is when you're probably going to learn something from what's gone on. And so somebody will say, I don't have this for you because I didn't have time to do my own job. I was busy managing and, trying to find receipts that these EVPs should have done themselves. I didn't have enough time to do my own job. Is that an excuse, or is that a reason why you didn't bring it to me? You know the difference if you have a reason and then you declare the learning from it. I didn't have time to do my own job. And what I've learned from that is that I'm going to sit down with these people and make sure they understand I'm not going to make an exception, because it then creates a bigger problem of not being able to do what I'm here to do. And so I learned that I haven't been clear that there's going to be a consequence. If it's just an excuse, it's like, I didn't have time to do my own job, these people don't keep the rules, and then it just keeps going and going and going. So the distinction between an excuse, which doesn't make you very desirable as an employee, is with a reason that I'm not, didn't do what I said I was going to do or don't have it, and I learned something. And so I teach this over and over and over again. A boss doesn't want to hear an excuse. If they hear a reason and learning, then you become more valuable to the organization. So I just gave the top reasons or excuses that people make. And I asked them to pick the top 2 that they experienced and say, okay, where are you using this as an excuse not to be totally personally accountable for your success at work? And where are you making it a reason? As an excuse or a reason. Be very cognizant of that to grow and develop, because then you'll start to stand out. If you become an excuseless person and you don't finger point and blame, and you have reason and learning, I own, I act on, I answer for it, you start to demonstrate that 100% that you should never, ever in your life use another person as your excuse not to have that 100%. It's yours. Just because other people are doing it, or we're getting massive examples over and over and over again in the world of people not being accountable and getting rewarded for it. And what the big changeover that's happened is that not being accountable is getting rewarded more than being accountable. In some cases, the company tanked, but the executives still got their pay. The audit showed cheating, but they didn't have to admit guilt and just pay a fine. It's nutty. Not being accountable, getting rewarded more than being accountable. And all of us are complicit in small ways. Just when I think to some degree, when my kids were growing up, and I'd say, you got to do this thing or you don't get your allowance, or you've got to, be home by this time, or there's a consequence. You got to be accountable. If I relented because it was just easier to do it myself, or it was just easier to let them, get off the consequence because I didn't have to listen to the whining. But anytime I think it's just easier to do it myself when I'm holding someone accountable for their job, then that's a reward. If I tell them to clean their room 100 times and they don't, and I do it for a little nagging, they get free maid service. I mean, it's weird. But at the end of the day, it's just easier to do it myself. A lot of managers have had that mindset, and it's demeaning, frankly, to not hold someone accountable for what they're capable of, to work around them, to pass them around the organization. And then talk about an ethical dilemma. It is, and I'm going to give them a good performance evaluation so they're not my problem anymore. That's unethical. It is also very demeaning. So not holding people accountable to what they're capable of, that faces a lot of managers. It's like, I don't want them to lose their job, but I don't want it to be my problem either, so I'll just pass it on. The whole idea of this is to understand that individuals carry their success or failure with them. It does not depend on outside conditions, and that you have to take a hard look at your own belief around that. How much is up to me for success? And please define success for yourself. As the pandemic has hit as your college experience has changed, you have to define what success is, not your goals. What is success? Success is completing my curriculum using a new set of tools so that I learn, this level of concept so that I can function in the world. Have had to change my definition of success for my business. When 9/11 happened, all of my travel was wiped off my calendar. I mean, it was a sea change, but I had to redefine success. Success is creating video delivery. Success, just going back to how will I be successful in a new environment? Same happened as a pandemic hit. It's got to stop and recalibrate. You are totally personally responsible for your success at work. So then I ask with my assessment, well, how much do you think is up to you? How much is outside condition? And people start all over the place. A whole lot of it is, very little of it is, but a way to think about it so that you're taking ownership is if you were in a surgery, you were the person getting the surgery, and you got to ask every person with a role in you being okay, how much personal accountability are you taking for this being a good outcome? What answer do you want? And you don't want somebody to say, well, for my part, I'm here for you, but these people aren't really ready and they haven't worked together and they don't know each other very well, but good luck. But I'm here for you, for my part. That whole my part creates a problem, especially when we're working in team, and not holding someone accountable for what they're, for example, the surgeon is the person in the most power often, and a nurse sees that surgeon not use the checklist and they're about to do a wrong side surgery. And the nurse says, but he yelled at me the other day when I corrected something, and so it's not mine. Those environments where we can't hold each other accountable, if we're going to violate an ethics rule, et cetera, then what are we walking into? It's not going to come out okay for the person we're doing this for. So the work I do is to see where the mindsets are. And the book I wrote is called The 85% Solution, because what we know is if it's at 85% or higher, then it's going to be a really solid organization to work in. So I do this assessment, we do an aggregate, and once it gets to 85% or higher, low stress, productivity, job satisfaction, going to operate within ethical bounds, going to be accountable. It's amazing. So we have to see where we're starting from, and people start in different places. Two people can have the same job and very different mindsets about how much is up to them and how much is outside condition. So when you go to interview in an organization, you have to ask questions about how it operates around ethics and accountability and personal integrity. The personal integrity part for me is you always have choice. It doesn't, I'm going to work in an organization that has not the best reputation, but that's what I'm choosing. So it's not making anything bad or wrong. It's just saying I own the choices I make. So I get insights in the mindset to the extent this is going to be going on in an organization. And it's pretty fascinating. And a lot of times it's not a fit for some individuals because they operate at a very high level of personal accountability and the organization does not. So you can't mandate accountability. You can only demonstrate it. And I just want you to walk away with this idea that keeps you on the path, which is what's on everybody's mirror in the organizations I work in. I'm responsible, self-empowered, and accountable for understanding the role, the task, the final deliverable, and the due dates. It's up to me to be clear and successful in my role. And if obstacles or conflicting priorities arise, it's still up to me to gain focus and create greater effectiveness. So it's the ultimate mindset of no fault, no blame, no guilt. In society, we use the word responsibility, and I could just clear it up in an organization. It's your mindset before you go in. How much is up to you? How much is outside condition? But we get pushback. Take responsibility for my own life. Is that even legal? That we're even questioning that is heartbreaking. But yeah, it is legal, and it is yours to have a mindset of personal responsibility. Then take action and risk. Organizations will push back, even though they say that's what they want. innovation, creativity, risk-taking. Self-empowerment is uncomfortable. And let me tell you, the top 3 self-empowerment behaviors you walk into an organization and interview, say you do. I talk to, not about other people. I don't have meetings after the meeting that are counterproductive, that start to undermine what we agreed to in a meeting. And I don't rescue, fix, and save underperformance. I hold that person accountable. You know what my biggest retention problem right now in organizations is that the best performers are getting the work of the underperformer because they don't want to hold the person accountable. And so they hope the team will take care of it. And the best performers say, I didn't come here to do the work of people you don't want to hold accountable. I didn't come to work to be told that we all need to step it up. I've been in that meeting 8 times because you don't want to talk to 2 people who are the problem. And to hear, we hired the best and the brightest. I don't want to be a part of the bologna soup. I want to be, challenged and given an opportunity to self-empower and take action and risk. And then answer for my results. After the fact, what I did, what I learned, what I'll do differently, how I'm accountable. And the lack of answering for results on the part of leadership is why I got out of being a newscaster. I wanted to do that my whole life. And I said, you can't say you understand accountability perfectly when something works and then suddenly be confused about it as a leader when it's not working and start finger pointing and blaming. Say what you did, what you learned, what you will do differently, and how you'll be accountable going forward. That's leadership. So there's too much of this going on. We're all tired of it. In no way, shape, or form needs to mean that we abdicate ours. We can own and act on and answer for ourselves, making clear agreements. And if I hear this one more time, it's unethical, but it's not illegal. That's where personal integrity is on each of us. Push back. Again, I would think that the CFO who said, I've got to push back and was scared to do it. Well, we have to have an environment where that is allowed and welcomed. The business case, ultimately, if you want to be that person, make it your steady mantra to talk to people, not about them. If it's a negative thing in a workplace, even in work projects at school, don't have meetings after the meeting that undermine. Don't do it. Just say, you know what, we need to bring this back in the room, and don't rescue, fix, and save. Treat people like they're capable and able, and just get clear again. If you don't hold underperformers accountable, you punish the best. That's what I'm dealing with right now, a lot in organizations. So when I teach this concept in executive groups, the CEO has to be in the room in order for me to bring it in the organization. I don't want them to run out of the room and tell everybody what they should. Don't should on other people. Leave them alone, because it's so annoying when someone gets excited about a concept and then says, okay, well, what do you want me to do? So what I want you to do is take a check on yourself and ask yourself, do I like bologna soup? If I don't, how do I get it off this menu? And, it's either feast or famine. It is. I mean, there's too many companies I'm dealing with right now where we are just getting bologna off the menu, like the examples I gave you, to say, say what you mean. And if someone challenges you ethically, that you're open to seeing what that is and what your role in it is, and then tell them where you stand with it. That's what we're going to be doing. So with that, that's my message to you today. Your takeaways, and I'm leaving time for questions, which I hope you have, because I love questions.
There are some questions, Linda. Thank you so much for your presentation. Let's give Linda one of these hands here, if you would, and then we'll jump into some of these questions. Looks like we have about 15 minutes, and we'll try to go rapid fire, but there's some really good questions. This one comes from Alicia Martinez. It says, usually I struggle with holding myself accountable, especially now. I feel like it is so much easier to procrastinate during this pandemic. Do you have any tips for finding motivation and not procrastinating so much?
I do. I so do. And I feel for you, whoever asked that question. Here's the thing. Make a distinction between motivation and discipline. So there's certain things I will never be motivated to do that I have to do. For example, exercise. I don't get up in the morning and like, I'm so motivated to exercise. This is gonna be great. I have to exercise in order to keep as sharp and nice looking as I am. I have to exercise. So it's a discipline. There is, put a discipline in place for a few things that are have tos. So put a discipline in place that says, I will do what I need to do, not what I like to do first every morning. Just put that discipline in place and then have a consequence if you don't keep to it. You know, something that really does hurt. So now for me, with exercise in particular, I get up every morning, and if I don't do that thing, it's gotten to the place where I feel like I'm really missing something. It has made a measurable difference. But if you put into place something, the second thing I have in place is do what I need to do, not what I like to do first in my calendar. Then there's times when I do procrastinate and I give myself some wiggle room. So don't be so hard on yourself, but absolutely put a couple of disciplines in place where motivation is not going to carry the day. Then start looking at what does motivate you, because you know what employers are going to ask, what motivates you? If you don't have an answer, you know, it's just falls flat. And you can say, you know, I've had people be very shy about what motivates them. They'll say, I really appreciate when someone tells me when I've done a good job and it's authentic and genuine. That motivates me a lot. But they don't appear to be someone who needs that. So be sure you're able to articulate what motivates you and put one or two disciplines in place. Disciplines in place, don't collapse the two.
Excellent, excellent. Next question is from Piper Steinmetz. It says, it sounds like more often than not with managers that you've run into that they have the attitude of, if you want something done right, do it yourself, and that mentality. How do you help those managers overcome this and delegate responsibilities and accountability to subordinates?
That is such a good question. You know, there's managers who want to be liked more than they want to be effective. And then there's the micromanagers. I just wrote a spectacularly good piece on LinkedIn. If you find me on LinkedIn and read the one about micromanaged ? That's the title of it. It's actually the last one I published. Because the worker with the new virtual environment is, you know, if their manager could reach through the screen and they would. And so it covers two sides. Are you a micromanager because you want things done right, do it yourself? Or are you micromanaged, and how do you handle that? So at the end of the day, when we discover this person is willing to go to Control Freaks Anonymous and get better, it gets down to the clear agreement is a tool I use, because they have to let go. And if they're not going to, then when they hire people, I say, you have to put down on the job description, willing to be micromanaged. Because I don't know anybody who comes to work to be micromanaged, but you are not changing your behavior. You are getting the results, but your turnover is horrendous because of your micromanagement. And you have to give up being liked over being effective. And so, you know, they get oftentimes they get amazing performance evaluations from their people. I love my boss. She does my job for me. When the micromanager says, or the rescue fixer saver, the control freak says, you know what, I've totally listened to my coach. I'm not doing this anymore. In the past, I take care of this. I'm not taking care of it anymore. It doesn't do you any favors. It doesn't do me any favors. It doesn't do us any favors. So I created this problem and I see that and I'm changing it. Man, I'll tell you what, that next performance evaluation goes like, now they're going to get a delta return on it, but they have to have a coach to bring them through the part that says, I used to like the old one that used to take care of everything. And I would say, you know, if you don't do this, I'm not going to like you. I mean, that is a real dynamic. And that's where coaching comes in to say, you're better than this, and you're enabling, that's a buzzword, you're people that can't do their job. You're right, it does get done right your way. Everybody loves you and you're exhausted and resentful. And you're creating your own problem. So quit hitting yourself in the head. I call it a self-inflicted accountability wound. Knock it off. That's my coaching.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. This is from Kyra Slavic. If one of your closest friends is doing something unethical, what is the best way to let them know and not create a problem of it.
Okay, that's like saying to me, okay, I have this table I'm holding on to, and I want that chair across the room. And I'll say, okay, let go of the table. And he's like, no, make my arm longer. I mean, how do I not have a problem with it? If you don't have a problem with the fact that your friend is doing something unethical, then something's wrong. I have a problem with this. It's not ethical. So let's talk about what solutions are. Would you like some suggestions on what to do? And if the friend says, well, if I don't do anything about it and I just go ahead with it, so what? What are you saying? You're not going to be my friend anymore? Hey, I work with people I don't trust all the time, but I work with them differently than the people I trust. I work with unethical people all the time, but I work with them differently. And do I do, things that are going to impact my career? Those individuals, no. The people that are going to make the right choices, yeah, absolutely. Are there people that I've cut out of my life because I think they are unethical, or it's easier when it's just illegal, I was like, because that's just like, no. But yeah, I mean, there's people I've stopped interacting with. I just can't, it's bologna soup. It's like every time I'm around them, they put a big hot steaming thing of bologna soup in front of me. It's like, I'm not starving and you're not the only person on the planet. But I will have a conversation from my experience with them and say, I'm really concerned. This is unethical. And I have a couple of options and suggestions to solve this. And if they don't want anything to do with it, as far as I'm concerned, they've made their choice about what they're going to be doing. But I'm not owning it.
Got it. Thank you, Linda. We've got one more question I want to get in front of you. There are a few others, but I don't know that we'll have time, but we can try.
Okay.
This one is a question. Do you help your startup? First, said thank you for your presentation. And then secondly, do you help the startups that you work with create a set of guiding values and principles? And if so, what does that process look like? And do they choose the values, or, how do you help them integrate those values and principles in their culture?
It's rare that a startup wants that particular activity. They're looking for accountability more than anything else. Over time, they'll get to the place where they want a set of founding values. Most of the time, if they do it right up front, they're lying. It's like a wish list for the future. I call it trying to put a saddle on a unicorn. It comes up in conversation. The CEO has to be the instigator of the need for the values as a statement. In just real beginning startup world, like they're in their first 3 years. I don't do it because I'm not asked to do it. That's not on their plate. They're looking for funding. The funders don't ask for it. They're asking, what are your sales, what's your potential audience, and what's your exit strategy? It's a do whatever it takes culture, and I try to get them out of that to be let's be an accountable culture. Talk to, not about. Don't have meetings after the meeting. We've got to be a tight team, not that other picture I showed you. It's doable, but it's rarely asked for.
Excellent. Next question. How do you, as a coach, work with CEOs and C-suite execs that want change but aren't willing to do the right thing?
I don't work with them. I do an assessment before. This is so interesting. 100% of my work today is a CEO that brought me to the next company or was a VP at one and moved over. They come now, let's get these people on the same. They had to do a transformation. There was usually tears involved for the CEO. They're like, she's just call her. Like, they'll tell their friends about me. But they have to take the assessment so I can see what I'm starting with. And this is the true thing on my coaching. This is true. So a CEO will say, okay, so, next coaching, and I have them sign an agreement with me for coaching. And I'll say, look, if you don't do the assignments between the first coaching and the next, it's over. We're done. I get my fee, but I'm not a babysitter and I don't pull teeth. So I listened to what's going on, and we're going to do this, and this is how you're going to have to behave and what's required of you. And, you know, the second they get on the phone for the next coaching, they say, so I was really busy and I didn't get to, and I just hang up. I say, when they call back and say, I think we got disconnected. I said, no, you signed the paper. So you got to be really clear. The other, so I don't waste my time with, you know, people tell me all the time, my CEO really needs this. I'm like, they're not going to hire me. They're probably making money hand over fist with their unaccountable behavior. They're not going to change. The ones that really see they're not getting accountability over there because it's not over here, it's very humbling. It's very emotional for them to see and look at themselves in the mirror. And I hold up the mirror. It's with dignity and respect, but I don't take any bologna soup either. I just don't. So you have to really be ready for it. The reason I'm scared right now is because so many are not measuring up at all. They're just not. And it's like they can't even be a client. Like, that's my living. But I have 3 or 4 companies right now where I'm on by referral, or this is somebody I've worked with before and I'm getting their team up to speed. It's hard. It's hard road for sure.
Excellent. Linda, there were a couple more questions, and if you're willing, we'll shoot them
I'm
to
willing.
you via email.
Come on, guys. It's right on the hour. Come on.
Well, I know we've got classes that are here, so I know students will have to move on, but we'll send them to you via email if you're willing to answer them that way. That would be outstanding. I will share as a couple comments over here, and one that I think you appreciate. It says, you know, I hope this is being recorded so that I can use it in my classroom. So it is being recorded. I'll tell you, first thing is call Linda and say, Linda, can you give a presentation to my class? And that'll help Linda as well as help her continue to spread the word about accountability. But then also we will make available excerpts of the presentation today via our recording. So Linda, thank you again so much for being here. It has been a pleasure to hear you share your information about accountability and leadership. The 85% Solution is a great book. I encourage you to get one. I have a couple of them here in my office, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And just so you guys know, Linda has a rich history with the Center for the Public Trust. She was one of our first board members of the organization. She's showing you her founding member coin there that she received from being a founding member of the Center for Public Trust. So Linda, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys all for joining us today. Tomorrow, we will be back same time here for another presentation on leading from wherever you are. And I'll be happy to deliver that, and we'll have some fun again tomorrow. So again, thank you guys, and see you tomorrow. Linda, thanks. Take care.
Welcome. Bye.